So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to pre-think assumptions. My name is Rajat Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. In this webinar, supporting us, we have Harsha, who's a senior subject matter expert, who's a principal subject matter expert at e-GMAT. And then we have Sandeep, who's a principal strategy expert at e-GMAT. My goal in this session is going to be, depending on the audience that we have over here, to A, if you've never done pre-thinking, to introduce you to pre-thinking, and B, if you've done pre-thinking before, I want you to take you guys to that next level so that you can be better pre-thinkers. Essentially, regardless of who you are, I want to put you on that path to achieving that 90th, that 95th, 97th percentile ability in GMAT critical reasoning. With that, we have about 100 students in this webinar. I want to get to know you guys a bit better. So I want to know, first of all, when do you plan to take the test, number one, and number two, what is your target GMAT score? Harsha, if you can get that question here, the target GMAT score, that's something which we can really put in here. So with that, when do you guys plan to take the test? I can see that, about 23% of you haven't decided a date as of yet, but we also have many of you, about half the class over here, that plans to take the test within the next 1 month or so. And then let's talk about the target GMAT scores here. So all right, 710, 720, really popular score bucket. 730 to 750, again, very popular as well. Few folks up for the 760, and then 600 to 700, quite a few folks as well. Now, there's a particularly interesting data point here, the one that I see at the bottom, where about half the class has plans to take the test within the next 1 month. I'm going to bring in the chat pod once again, because this is a statistic I don't usually see, and we do these sessions every weekend. So, so again, let's bring in those of you who plan to take the test within the next 1 month or so, within the next 15 days or a month. What are you aiming to get out of it, and what's the motivation to really take the test within the next 1 month? And I kind of know the answers, but let's, it's really good to get that data point there. So we do justice to what you're looking to achieve over here. Deadlines, okay. Round 2 deadlines are coming in, yes. It's not LOL, it's about your career, Ravin. So yeah. Motivation, early January deadline. See, that's a new insight, yes. 2021 is ending. You want to get done with it. That's good. Okay. What are you looking to get out of this? I think let's get that as well. Poor performance in critical reasoning, so you want to improve that performance. All right. Retake, round 1 is not up to the expectation. Framework, leaving enough time to have one more try if this goes south. Don't. Yeah, so we'll talk about that. Same as JV, okay. You're generally okay in CR, you want to make sure how to get it better, want to crack it in the first attempt. I like that part, want to crack it in the first attempt, or want to ace the GMAT in the first attempt. That's good. Thank you very much. Really good insights, guys. And this participation is what makes this interesting for us. These insights are what allow us to personalize this session to make sure that you guys benefit from it. All right. So again, as I said, my goal is to make sure that you become better pre-thinkers, and then post this webinar, I'm going to reserve some time if you guys have questions which are outside of the purview of critical reasoning to other aspects of your GMAT preparation or even your MBA admissions. Now, to get the most out of this session, we want to make sure that you have a certain kind of foundation, and to build that foundation, we send a few video lessons your way. The top left-hand corner is where those video lessons are. If you've gone through, 1 or 2 of these lessons, you're beautifully prepared for this session. And so that's congratulations. Give yourself a pat on the back. If you've not gone through this, I'm going to do a brief introduction in this session, but post this session, make sure you go through them. They'll extend that learning phase beyond this webinar, and make sure that you get the most out of this webinar. These are part of your free trial. You log into your e-GMAT account, and you get to them. You should be able to get there. Now, if you are a paid student, of course, go to the critical reasoning course. With that, we also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a number properties webinar tomorrow. If you are one of those students who struggles with remainders questions, this is the webinar for you. We go from like very foundation to 700 level data sufficiency questions. I absolutely love this webinar. Um, I think in terms of e-GMAT webinars, this is one webinar that goes right from the basics to the end. And post this session, people need very little time to really make sure they themselves achieve that high ability in the context of remainders. And then next week we have a strategy webinar for those of you who are aiming for that high GMAT score and ideally have about 20-25 days or more. This is the webinar for you, which says, hey, how should you, given your strengths and weaknesses, aim for that 730, 740 score? If you're an e-GMATer, of course, you guys already have that guidance through the PSP, through interactions with the strategy team. But then if you want to hear it from me or Pyle, this is something that you should attend as well. Again, the links are there. We'll be happy to share those links again. And we already discussed this. Okay, I want to actually get one more data point here, and this was something that I've been asking, which is what kind of where do you plan to take the test? So do you want to take it uncentered? Do you want to take it online? And which is, you know, in the comfort of your house, or if you're not decided, you can choose no preference, and yeah. So just want to kind of understand the pulse of this group and how we are going. Okay. Let's just go over here. So with that, we're now in the webinar pane, and as we get into the webinar pane, the screen will have changed for you. I'm going to just adjust this slightly so that it's laid out nicely. What you see on the screen are three different panes. So you have a presentation pane, which is where, you know, that's something that I'd be talking to. A lot of the content would be here. Below this pane, you have a question and answer pane. This is the pane which is for your questions. So you have a question during the session, post that question over here. The reason why Harsha and Sandeep are here is to make sure that they respond to those questions here. And that's so post those questions here, and we'll be happy to do that. On the right hand side, and this entire area on the right hand side is for my questions to you. So the way we make this webinar interesting is by posting questions to you. So when I post a question, respond to either the short answer pod or the poll question, where you have a multiple response or a single response question over here. So this is where you participate. Below the presentation is where you ask. And if we do that, we're going to keep this session on time. We're going to end it in about 2 hours from now or so, and each one of you is going to get a lot of what you came here for, and your time will be really well spent. Now I see a couple of you have raised your hands. One thing that Sarvottam or Bhavika, again, if you have a question, post it in the Q&A pod, because raising hand doesn't help us do a whole lot. Again, raising hand, the feature isn't as great as posting the question here. Yes, and who on the webinar is live. We have about 125 people right now in the webinar. Okay, with that, let's go right into the crux of this webinar, and we have a bunch of marketing slides. I don't want to get to those. I want to just start with the webinar right away. So again, as I said, there are three parts of this webinar. The first part, usually I have a bit of marketing, but given there's so many people who have the test right now, I'm not going to do any of that. We're going to start right over here, and then, as I said, towards the end, we'll reserve some time for Q&A. Okay. So how are we going to go about doing this? We're going to talk about pre-thinking. What is it, and what is it? What is pre-thinking, and why do we think it's important? Then we're going to actually go through what we call as a pre-thinking exercise. And where we're going to practice pre-thinking on pure arguments, and pure arguments are arguments that don't have a lot of that don't have answer choices. So the goal really is to understand the mindset of a pre-thinker, and this is where we'll do about 2 arguments, and then we'll do 1 full-length question over here, and so this is what I call as the initial phase. This is the pre-thinking baking phase. This is the pre-thinking application phase. And once we're done with this, we're going to apply this to 2 full-length questions. We're going to look at stuff such as doing the negation test and other pieces. And then post that, we're going to say, okay, where do you go next? And what should you solve next? And how can you participate more? Because what this webinar will do is introduce you to pre-thinking, tell you why it's effective, and then post this. You still have to follow up on this to make sure that you get to that 90th percentile. Nadesh has a great question. It says, is this webinar equally important for people starting as well as those who are in the last stages of the prep? Equally important is one of those things which I can't justify, but is this webinar important for both segments? It is, yes. If you are in the last stages of your preparation, if you already know what pre-thinking is, then I think as we get towards the second argument here and then the full length questions, you're going to find it very, very useful. Uh, because the first part you probably already know. On the other hand, if you have no idea what pre-thinking is, you're going to find the first part extremely useful, and of course the next part would be useful to you as well. So great question, Nitish. Okay, so again, at a very high level, this is what we'll be doing in this case. So let's talk about your current approach to critical reasoning here, and I'm going to put in a poll question. I'm going to talk about two methodologies that people use to solve critical reasoning question. I want you to tell me which methodology do you follow today. And I have 136 students here. I'd like to get at least 80 answers. Now, before we talk about this, I want to talk about what pre-thinking is. Okay, a lot of people actually define pre-thinking incorrectly, and they think pre-thinking is predicting the answer. That's not what we are doing. Pre-thinking is a method of making sure that before you look at answer choices, you understand A, what the conclusion is, and B, what is the logic that the author uses to arrive at the conclusion. So how we ensure that you know both of these is that if you're able to pre-think one good assumption before looking at answer choices, this means you can do pre-thinking. Now, this is what I call as stage one of pre-thinking. When you become a skilled pre-thinker, you should be able to do this in about 15 seconds. This is what a skilled pre-thinker is able to do. Just after reading the argument, take about 15 seconds, pause, and need to be able to do that pre-thinking. Okay. Now, remember this has to be done, and this is one of the biggest challenges that people face, that you've got to do pre-thinking before you even look at a single letter in the answer choices. The moment you look at answer choices, you can throw pre-thinking out of the window. Why? Because answer choices provide us with new information that pollute the information that the argument provides. So pre-thinking has to be done before you actually look at the answer choices. Now, this term has existed for, I think, eons in the world of GMAT preparation, but no one precisely defined this. We were the first company to define this. And in fact, even if you read textbooks today, you'd find pre-thinking or see other experts, they'll say pre-thinking is same as predicting the answer. No, it is not. It is simply a means to ensure that you've understood the logic that the author uses to arrive at the conclusion. Okay. So with that, let's kind of talk about which approach do people follow. There are two methodologies that people use to solve CR questions today, or two dominant methodologies, and I want you to tell me which one do you follow. And once you put in those answers there, I'm going to broadcast the results. That way your answer is not impacted by, or you're not influenced by what others are posting in. So I have about, out of 80 or out of 135 participants here, I only have about 45 responses. Let's get to 80 responses before I broadcast results, guys. So methodology one, you read the argument, look at the answer choices, do that back and forth. Methodology two is read the argument, pre-think an assumption, and then evaluate the answer choices till you get to the final candidate. So, okay, I have 75. I have 81 responses. That's excellent. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. And about 55% of you follow what we call as the back and forth approach, but 45% of you follow the pre-thinking approach. My goal is that my objective with this is to say, 2 days post this session, I want to get 80% of the people who follow the pre-thinking approach. That's methodology 2 over here. Or at least give it a good solid try. That's something that I want to do. Now, one thing, there are no brownie points in this webinar to go one way or the other. As long as both you and I are respectful to each other, that's all that I expect, other than the fact that you would participate. Why? Because if you're here spending your time, the best way to get most out of this webinar is to participate. So even if you chose methodology 1 over here, you are just as good a student for me as you would be if you chose methodology 2. Being honesty is what I care about in this webinar. Okay. Now, the thing that I want to make sure that you understand is pre-thinking isn't like a magic wand that will solve all your problems. Pre-thinking builds on the skills that you need to excel in GMAT CR, and these are skills that you need regardless of whether you follow the pre-thinking approach or not. And the most important skills, which is there, that you need to do is the ability to visualize the argument. And visualizing the argument means that visualizing the conclusion first in your own words. And I cannot emphasize this enough, and we're going to see this happen again and again as we solve questions. Okay. And then the second thing is, to be able to look at the answer choices and visualize them in your own words again. When we make mistakes, we fail to do this, or we do this incorrectly. 9 out of 10 times, this is what happens. The second thing is to build that logical structure, which is to really say, hey, once you visualize that conclusion, once you know what the conclusion is, you have to argue why does the conclusion make sense. Now, GMAT critical reasoning arguments are very well built. And if you don't argue why does the conclusion make sense, you won't be able to figure out how to break that conclusion, which is a necessary skill for answering assumption questions. And then once you've done this third piece here, which is formulating the falsification question, is let's go back to the prior slide. This third piece here is a fairly simple thing. Okay, but building that skill to visualize and understanding that logical structure is really important. Shubham has a really great question. He says, is it necessary to pre-think to arrive at an assumption in all questions? Because in some questions, I'm unable to pre-think an assumption. Look at the careful wording of this question, which is why I like this question. He says, is it necessary in all? Because in some, I'm unable to do that. So is it necessary in all? The answer to that is no, it's not necessary. I think one of the other benefits of pre-thinking is that because you're spending the time to understand the argument, even if you're not able to come up with a good pre-thinking, you'll have a fairly good idea of what would break my conclusion, and that will help you get to the correct answer. And Shubham, if you're able to pre-think in most questions, then I'm sure this is something that's happening. Now, again, this is a more advanced level. For someone who's in that more advanced level, this is a question that person would ask, and I think, Shubham, you are that person. So if you struggle with doing pre-thinking with some questions, these are questions, and you still get them right, or maybe you get them wrong, these are questions that provide you with the most learning opportunity, and which is where, post doing this question, spend 10 minutes to really say, why were you not able to visualize what would break that conclusion, or how you would arrive at the answer. So the answer is no, it's not necessary, but these are the questions which get you to that next level. So with that, let's kind of talk about what an assumption is. We've been talking about pre-thinking. We are going to pre-think assumptions. So let's first understand what an assumption is. So I'm going to put in this poll question here. I'm going to put in an argument, which is a very, very simple argument. And I want you to tell me, what does the author assume here? Here's the argument. Tell me, what does the author assume here? And the reason why I want to ask you to do this is because I want to tell you, each one of you can pre-think without even me teaching you pre-thinking, as long as you can visualize the argument. And this is one argument that you guys can visualize fairly easily. So again, this is the short answer pod, which you see on the right hand side. You type your answer in, you press enter, I get it. You don't see that I've gotten it, but I will get it. The system works that way. And once I broadcast results, you'll see the answer that you posted. Okay. Again, please post your answers on the right hand side pod, not in the Q&A pod, which is below the presentation. All right, while you guys are posting your answers, I have about 15 answers, 20 answers already here. Jennifer has a question, why don't we have a chat box? Jennifer, I want to enhance participation here, and when you post answers, sometimes in the chat pod, it comes with your name over there, and some people then are shy of posting answers. That way, when you post answers here, your name doesn't come here, and I don't get to know who's posting what. Although I can get to know, it's just very cumbersome for me to figure that out, and other people don't see who's posting what. So in my opinion, it increases participation. So with that, let me broadcast results. We have a number of responses over here. But great question, Jennifer. Okay. All right. So let's look at this. And some really good answers over here. I will accept only GMAT score for admission. The minimum requirement for GMAT score is this thing. Whether the first one is a must be true or not, I think we'll really debate, but the second one definitely is. Ivy League don't accept GMAT scores in that band. So most of you have gotten the crux of what this argument's about. Have put in a response that that essentially is in line with what the argument is supposed to be. And this kind of clearly shows that you guys everyone, we as humans, can think about what an assumption is if we understand the argument well enough. So what's going on over here? Here, the author provides you with a data point. It says, hey, Joe scored this particular number, 500 on the GMAT. And based on this, the author makes this conclusion saying that Joe is not going to get admission in an Ivy League college. And so essentially, suddenly, as you go from that data point, or a fact as we call it, to the second statement starting with therefore, which is a claim, you say, hey, how the hell is he talking about an Ivy League college? There has to be a logical jump over here, which is what the author makes in this case. And you say, okay, while making that jump, the author must be making an assumption. And the assumption is that a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. Now, the piece here, which I think many of you missed, but again, it's not because of conscious nature, but because of the specific nature of assumption, is this piece of someone like Joe. And one thing which is really important to know is that the assumption is always tied to the conclusion. The conclusion is about Joe, not about the Prince of Saudi Arabia. So the assumption also has to be for that group of people who are like Joe. That's very important that I want you to tell you. But other than that, I mean, you guys are good. You guys are really doing this well. So with that, I want you to tell me, what do you think an assumption is? What's the formal definition of an assumption? Okay, I'm going to again remove broadcast results. So again, type your answers in. I'm going to broadcast results when I get a few more responses. Okay, I have about 20 odd responses. 26, 27. Let's get to 30, and then I'm going to broadcast results. Okay, let me broadcast results. You guys should now be able to see what others are typing in. Must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Common sense, you don't need to explain, but get it instantly, or it's definitely not super common. Otherwise, we won't have 135 people here. Think what the other person must have thought, something that without being stated acts as a base for the argument. Okay. Must be true for the conclusion, but not mentioned in the passage. Good. So I see that many of you, again, some of you have gotten it absolutely correct, very, very precise, and I love that. Others have a vague idea what an assumption is, and so they kind of have a feeling about it, but they don't have that precise definition. And the reason why having that precise definition is very important is because critical reasoning, in many ways, is like physics, where there aren't a ton of rules. So very different from sentence correction. Sentence correction has a ton of rules that you've got to remember. Or if you do the e-GMAT way, you don't have to remember very many rules either, but more rules than CR does. CR has very few rules, or what I call as very few definitions. And this one definition of an assumption is one such definition. If you know this, you can pretty much answer every CR question as long as you can read and write and visualize properly. Okay. An assumption is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. And there are certain parts that I want to kind of highlight over here. So first of all, an assumption, as I said earlier, is always linked to the conclusion in the argument. Nothing else in the argument but the main conclusion or the author's conclusion that is there. The second thing is an assumption is an unstated idea, which means that you can't infer this from any facts that are given in the argument. And then the third thing is that it must satisfy a very specific test, what we call as the must be true test. And if you understand 2 and 3, what you're going to find is it's going to be very, very easy for you to figure out and get to the correct answer. Why? Because all incorrect answer choices are built around either 1 or 2 or 3. You'll have answer choices, which, by the way, have nothing to do with the conclusion. These are what we call as out of scope answer choices, and you'll reject that if you understand the conclusion. You'll have answer choices and which, by the way, are must be true, but they're explicitly stated in the argument, and hence you'll reject that. Why? Because it's stated. And then you'll have answer choices and many answer choices which are tempting, but they don't satisfy the must be true test, and hence they are incorrect. Okay. Or in other words, a good assumption has 2 necessary attributes, Okay, necessary and sufficient, I should say. It's not just necessary, but these are necessary and sufficient. One is it must provide new information, which means information that you can't infer from the argument. And the second is that it must satisfy this must be true condition. And a lot of our time would be spent on this attribute number 2, because this is that's tested in 95% of assumption questions. Now, usually in this webinar, I'm not going to ask you to write down many things, but if there's one thing that I want you to write down is this one definition of assumption. So please write it down, even though I'm going to give you the PDF during this session. I'm going to ask you to recite that definition again and again, because you will falter while solving questions. And when you choose an answer choice that seems tempting, but is not the correct assumption, I would want you to recite this, because the moment you recite this, you're going to be able to figure out why that answer choice is incorrect. Among issued assumptions also strengthen the argument. Absolutely, yes. Assumptions also make the argument stronger. Yes. Yes, every assumption is a strengthener, in other words. On the other hand, every strengthener is not an assumption, and we're going to see this with an example. At e-GMAT, we visualize everything. So let's kind of visualize this. So think about this entire house, and this is the best I could come up with. This entire house as your argument, where the roof is this conclusion. I mean, you built a house, you want to keep the roof upright, you want to make sure it doesn't cave in, and to make sure that the roof is stable, is upright, you have 3 pillars. These are what I call as the 3 supporting statements. You can call them the 3 premises in the argument. Okay. Now let's name these pillars 1, 2, and 3 for ease of use. And just to visualize this, the roof is the conclusion, and that's kind of why you build this house. Now, maybe you remove pillar number 1 and the roof stays upright. So in that case, that pillar number 1 is not an assumption. Remember, pillar number 1 was a strengthener. It made the roof stronger, but you could remove it. The roof is still there. And then that pillar number 1 is not an assumption. Okay. Then you say, I'm going to remove pillar number 3. The roof still stays upright. Pillar number 3 was a strengthener, but not an assumption. Okay. All right. However, you now bring all of them back and you remove pillar number 2. What just happened? The roof caved in. So what is pillar number 2? It is an assumption, and that is kind of the very visualization of an assumption, which is that despite pillar numbers 1 and 3 being here, the moment you remove pillar number 2, the roof came crashing down, or the conclusion came crashing down, and that's what an assumption is. Okay. First of all, does that make sense? Does that give you a better sense of what must be true means? It means that pillar number 2 must be there for that conclusion to stay upright, or for the roof to stay upright. That's what it is. Now, can an assumption have multiple essential pillars or multiple assumptions? Absolutely, yes. We're going to see in arguments that will have multiple assumptions. However, in your answer choices, you will only have one of those assumptions. So, or in other words, there is no stronger and weaker assumption. An assumption is an assumption. Okay, there's no relative strength. I mean, think about it. A roof is a roof. If you remove an essential pillar, it's going to come crashing down, and it doesn't matter, whether that pillar was holding 1,000 pounds of weight or whether it was holding 1,000,000 pounds of weight. If the roof crashes, the roof crashes. That is okay. So yes, an argument can have multiple assumptions, but you'll only get one in the answer choices. In fact, that's true for every question type in critical reasoning. An argument can have tens of strengtheners as well. You will only see one in those answer choices, although we're not going to deal with strengthened questions here, but just for your information. There's no weak or strong strengthener. I haven't seen that happen. Okay. So again, what is an assumption? It's that essential pillar. All right. So this is what we call as the must be true thing. What it means is if the information provided by assumption is not true, which means if you remove that essential pillar, then there's a possibility that the conclusion will break down, or the conclusion can no longer hold true. Okay. In other words, the assumption must be true for the conclusion to remain valid. One of the other interesting things is, the people who love to destroy statements, and those people do really well in assumption questions because, An assumption is essentially something that prevents the conclusion from being destroyed. So as you're going to see in a few minutes, the way to figure out assumptions is to figure out how to destroy conclusions. Okay. So let's kind of understand what does falsification of conclusion mean. So this is the same argument, same simple argument. Why? Because you guys can visualize this and say, how will we destroy this conclusion? He will not get admission in an Ivy League college. This conclusion gets destroyed if Joe gets into an Ivy League college with a score of 500, right? That's the destruction of conclusion. Can you guys see that? This is a scenario in which the conclusion gets destroyed. This is what the assumption is trying to prevent, right? So let's see, why is it that the assumption that you guys came up with, why do we call it the correct assumption? Okay. So we said this is our correct assumption. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the must be true test to really say, is this a must be true statement, or how is this the must be true statement? The reason we are doing this is because this is the same test regardless of the statement that you evaluate. And this test is not going to change regardless of the argument type or anything. As long as it's an assumption question, this test will remain the same. Okay. So the question that this is a statement that we're evaluating. A score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. So you're going to ask this question, is this must be true? Or in other words, will the conclusion break down if this statement no longer holds true? Now, this part's really important. When you say that a statement no longer holds true, what you're saying is that its negated instance automatically becomes true. And that's really important for you to understand. Okay. So when you say this statement no longer holds true, what you're really saying is this statement automatically becomes true. So the statement that a score of 500 for someone like Joe is acceptable to Ivy League colleges. Now, once that happens, does my conclusion break down? Once this happens, a score of 500 becomes acceptable. What happens to my conclusion? Does it break down? Absolutely, right? Why? Because if the score of 500 is acceptable, then I as an author can no longer say with 100% certainty that Joe will not get admission in an Ivy League college. Okay. Now, because the conclusion broke down in the presence of the negated instance, then what does this mean? That statement that we were evaluating was a must be true statement. We needed that statement to be true because the only way we can prevent the negated instance to be true is by saying that the statement is going to be true. Now, some of you may be saying, how do you say that if I say something's not true, then its negated instance becomes true? Let's kind of look at this statement. Let's say you're saying Harvard has the best MBA program and you say this is not true. By definition, you are also saying that an MBA program that is better than Harvard or just as good as Harvard exists, right? Are you not saying that? Okay. You're saying that, right? So when you say a statement is not true, then what you're really saying is this negated statement is true. Now let's translate this into answer choices. When you say an answer choice is not the correct assumption, you're also saying that that answer choice is not true. Or in other words, you're also saying that its negated statement instance is true. Okay. So just, and we're going to come back to this again. We just want to plant the seed in your mind. So let's take another statement. John runs faster than David. If you say that is not true, okay, then you can say John does not run faster than David, or David is as fast or faster than John. Yeah. Can there be two best? Yes, there can be two best. That's in case of B schools, it's acceptable. Again, the context is really important. Okay. So again, coming back to the core piece here, John runs faster than David. When you say it's not true, you're in a sense saying this piece as well. Are you not? If you say this is not true, you're also saying this. So when you say a statement is not true, you are saying its negated instance is true. Okay. So this is the essence of must be true. Why? And the reason why must be true exists is it comes from that definition of assumption, which is an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. Okay. It also works the other way. If you have an incorrect answer choice, which is not must be true, then what you're going to find is your conclusion stays intact. Nothing happens to the conclusion. Okay, let's take an example. Let's take an answer choice such as this one. A score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score, and we want to figure out, is this the correct answer choice? Okay, so let's look at this and ask the same question. Is it must be true? All right, or in other words, what we are asking is, will Joe get admission if this particular statement, a score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score, is not true? Again, when this is not true, its negated version becomes true. Or so the question that we are asking is, will this conclusion break down when a score of 500 becomes a good score? And the answer to that is no, not really. Why? Because when you read this argument here, the author's claim is not predicated, or it's not dependent on whether you classify the score as a good score or not. In other words, you could have replaced 500 by 700. The logic of the argument would still have remained the same. Okay, and that's really important for you to understand that, hey, this must be true. Understanding helps you get to the correct answer choice. It also helps you reject incorrect answer choices. And this seems like a very simple answer choice. It must be true test also helps you in more complex answer choices such as this one. Now, we're not going to discuss this here, but this is a bonus question which we are going to do on our YouTube channel. Harsha, if you have that link to the question that I sent over, you can share that link over here, and then we can really get to this. But this was an introduction to what an assumption is. This wasn't the pre-thinking approach. This is just some foundation information that, if you went through the initial files, you would have gotten some of it, and probably with 20 examples. But if you didn't, now you have the foundation. So with this, let's kind of focus on what pre-thinking is, and the skills that we're going to develop over here are the skills to visualize, skill to understand the author's logic, and then the skill to formulate the falsification question. Okay. Just to summarize, for the correct answer choice, what's going to happen is the conclusion is going to break down in the negated version. For the incorrect answer choice, the conclusion is still going to continue to hold true. By the way, there's a YouTube question where you can participate and say, same argument there, whether this is true or not. If you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, you probably have this in your feed already. If you've not, then get there. We'll solve some very interesting questions over there. All right. So with that, this is a warm-up piece. Now we're going to do step 2 of warm-up. We're going to try and pre-think assumptions and learn the pre-thinking approach on some more complex arguments. So first of all, I want to make sure that you have a pen and paper ready. So I'm going to put in a yes/no poll question. I want you to tell me if you have a pen and paper ready. Where's my yes/no? My generic yes/no is here. Pen and paper ready. Because I want to give you the most tools that you can get. All right, but 98% of you have it. That's wonderful. Thank you. I love the excitement here. Okay. So the way I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an argument. This is going to be slightly more complex than what we did earlier. It's not going to be Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, a bit more sophisticated. And I want you to take about 2 to 3 minutes to pre-think your answers. Again, no answer choices, just pure pre-thinking here. And then once you do that, we're going to follow on and really say how I go about pre-thinking this, and then we're going to get to this. Now, can someone tell me what was pre-thinking? Can you guys tell me what pre-thinking is? You can put that answer in the short answer pod. Pre-thinking is the process of thinking one assumption in your mind before you look at answer choices. Okay, just one potential assumption in your mind before you look at answer choices. Now you do this in about 15 seconds or so. Okay. All right. So with that, make sure you're ready. I'm going to clear the short answer pod. All right. And I want you to tell me, what does the author assume here? 3, 2, and 1. You should be seeing the argument now. I'm going to mute myself for about 2.5 to 3 minutes. So good luck, guys. Go slowly. You'll have ample All right, guys, another 40 seconds. Get those answers in. Five, four, three, two, and one. All right, let me broadcast the results. And you can continue to put your answers in, and you can, but you'll also see the time. You can also see what others have posted in this case. Okay. Okay. And there's some decent answers, but very few what I call as great answers in this case. And this is kind of why we are here to learn how to kind of build that framework to be able to pre-think in arguments that are not so natural um, to us. And this is an example of an argument. That's something that about which we don't think day in and day out. And to be better pre-thinkers, we have to be able to build a skill where we can look at context that we don't think about, can visualize them, and then get there. And this doing that is what I call as requires effort, and again doing pre-thinking also requires killing some old habits. And this is I had a very stark reminder while you guys were solving the session. I went in to get a glass of water, and while coming back, I moved into the office. I sat down and I recognized, hey, there is no session going on. Why? Because I moved into the wrong office, which used to be my old office. So, and even though I've been out of that office for about 3 months, my natural instinct was to go back to my old office. And it reminded me that, hey, if you don't do pre-thinking and you have the habit of going to answer choices, you guys will struggle with that as well. And it really, you have to tell yourself not to look at answer choices. Okay. So with that, let's kind of understand this. And we're going to go through this very systematically. You can see what others have said. And there's some good answers, but not very many here. So what we're going to do is we're going to first understand the conclusion. And we're going to assign some numbers to the conclusion. And that's really important. For me, visualizing the conclusion is always kind of going in there and making sure that I can assign numbers to it. And I can really just think about it and assume and imagine things right in front of me. Okay, then we're going to look at the reasoning that the author provides, and then we're going to ask this pre-thinking question. But the first step is, and the first skill is to really figure out which statement is the main conclusion, and then go about doing this. Now, what is this pre-thinking question that I talked about over here? Let me just talk about this. And this is again a standard question. This is the second statement that I want you to write down. So how do you come up with assumption? It seems like a very complex thing. The thing is, it's not as complex if you truly understand what the definition of an assumption is. And I don't know why people didn't figure this out. When we sat down to do this, it took us, even for us, it took us a couple of months. But once you look at it, the simplicity is just beautiful. So what's an assumption? It's an unstated idea that is required or that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Okay, so if you were to visualize, think about that house, think about that roof that we talked about, and those essential pillars, and those essential pillars are assumptions. So what happens when you take away assumptions? When without the assumption, that conclusion will break down. That roof will come caving down, right? That's what that essential pillar is there for, to prevent that roof from caving down. So when you think about where you put those essential pillars, or when you think about assumptions, you build assumptions around scenarios that break my conclusion, right? That's kind of how you go about building assumptions. You really look at scenarios where the conclusions break down. Okay, that's where you put those essential pillars. So to figure out assumptions, the one question you have to ask is, hey, in what scenarios does the conclusion break down? Why? Because that's kind of where I'm going to put these essential pillars, or that's where I'm going to put these assumptions. Does that make sense? If the job of an assumption is to prevent the conclusion from breaking down, let's kind of figure out where the conclusion breaks down and then put assumptions over there. That's all that we are doing. So the question that we're going to ask in every argument is, under what circumstances, given the facts in the argument, will the conclusion break down? This is the only question that we're going to ask, and regardless of the argument type. Okay, so with that, let's now look at the question here. Now, I want you to tell me which statement is the main conclusion. And I have a poll with 4 statements, but this argument only has 3 statements, so don't worry about this. The 4th statement. Tell me out of statement 1, 2, and 3, which statement you believe is your main conclusion. According to you, which statement is the main conclusion? Don't choose statement number 4. There is no statement number 4. There are only 3 statements here. Okay. I have 125 students here. Let's get to at least 75 responses. Which statement is the main conclusion? Once I get 75 responses, I'm going to broadcast the results. I have 50 responses. Again, really important. Identify the main conclusion here. I have 70 odd responses in this case. 72, good. I have 75 responses. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. 57% of you say statement 2 is the main conclusion. You guys are absolutely correct. Statement 2 is indeed the main conclusion. Many of you say statement 1 is the main conclusion as well, which is not true. And there are many of you who also say statement 3 is the main conclusion. Now, the first thing you've got to understand about the main conclusion is that it's always written by the author. And when you think about this, or it's written by the author, and it's the essence of the argument, or it answers the question, what does the author want me to believe in this argument? When you think about what the author wants you to believe in this argument, it's statement 2. The reason why the author has written this argument is to really say that the difference between professors in the full-time in the tenure system and other lecturers, when you say the difference, it's a difference in performance. It is because of the reward system for the professors over here. That's why the author has written this entire argument down, and that's why this is the author's conclusion. This is the main conclusion. Okay. Statement number 3 is written to support statement number 2, to make statement number 2 more believable. So it's a premise, or you can call it a strengthener. It's a premise that makes statement number 2 more believable, so it can't be the main conclusion. Now, statement number 1 is a context which sets the stage for the author to make the main conclusion. Statement 1 says, it talks about this published paper that concludes that tenured professors, or those on their way to tenure, they actually do not as great a job as full-time lecturers who are outside the tenure system do. Now, it uses the word concludes, and a lot of people say, hey, because it uses the word concludes, it must be the main conclusion. No, this is the paper's conclusion. It's not the author's conclusion. The author uses this information to make his own conclusion. All of you who chose statement 1 or statement 3 as the main conclusion, who selected that, are you guys clear as to why A1 is not the main conclusion and B, why 3 is not the main conclusion? Okay. Really important. So with that, let's kind of identify, let's visualize this conclusion. And so I think it's really important to visualize every aspect of the conclusion. The conclusion says clearly the difference between professors in the tenured system and full-time lecturers. So it's kind of comparing two entities. I'm talking about tenured professors and full-time lecturers, has to do with the reward system for the former. So again, there's a context to this conclusion where it says that, hey, the difference, what is this difference that's talked about? It's the difference in effectiveness. So always put numbers over there and say, okay, maybe tenured professors improve student learning to a 40%, on a scale to a 40% level, and full-time lecturers do it to a 70% level. Again, doesn't matter what numbers you choose. You may choose 50, 80, you may choose 60, 90, as long as you give full-time lecturers a number higher than tenured professors. It's just visualization that tells me. Also, I wouldn't really put 91 and 92. Why? Because they're just too close. So I want to make sure the difference is reasonable over here. Okay. The other piece which is really important is that the author actually is not disputing the report's finding. He's saying, yes, I agree the report is true. I'm just trying to figure out why does this happen? And figuring out, he's blaming the reward system for it. Folks over here, now can you visualize this conclusion, what this conclusion is talking about? And again, for some of you, this may seem trivial, but this step is really important because as arguments become more complex, you're going to actually lose the plot here. Okay. So with that, let's kind of build that argument structure. So let's look at statement number 3. Statement number 3, the job of statement number 3 is a supporting statement. Now, I want you to tell me whose reward structure does statement number 3 talk about? Okay, let's make sure. Whose reward system does statement 3 talk about? Does it talk about just tenured faculty? Does it talk about just lecturers? Does it talk about both, or does it talk about neither? Let's look at that. Let's get some more data points. Five, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And once again, excellent participation. Thank you very much. I'm going to broadcast results and end the poll, and you can see 74% of you got this right. It's just tenured faculty, but 24% of you got that wrong as well. And again, visualization, really important in this case, and understanding what each statement is talking about, to what extent it's talking about. When you see this statement, the criterion for rewarding tenured faculty, okay, so we're saying, okay, we're talking about tenured faculty only, places a greater emphasis as a comparative word on research than on teaching. So when you see this comparative word, I'm not saying that there's a greater emphasis than that of full-time lectures. What I'm really saying is maybe there's a 70% emphasis on research and there's a 30% emphasis on teaching. Okay, but at this point, we do not know anything about full-time lecturers over here. This is only talking about tenured faculty. We have no idea about full-time lecturers. Is that clear to everyone? And again, it may seem very obvious, but it's really important to have this distinction. Okay. All right. So now we have a solid understanding of the argument. Now we are able to get to that next step, which is the pre-thinking question. Okay. So the pre-thinking question is this: under what circumstances, given the information, the facts, and the argument, will my conclusion break down? So let's translate this question into the context of this argument. All right. So we say, under what circumstances would the reward system, so conclusion breakdown means the reward system, not be responsible for difference in performance? So the conclusion said the reward system was responsible. What we are saying is, hey, under what circumstances can we not blame the reward system, given that we know that full-time lecturers do a better job, and given that we know that the reward system for professors, that reward system places a greater emphasis on research than on teaching. Okay. Can you see how we translated this generic question into that specific form for this particular argument? Can you see that? Under what circumstances can we not blame the reward system given this information? Can you guys see this? Yes, no? You can type in your answers. Okay. And again, if this seems a bit more complex, we're going to do this 5 more times in this session. Okay. Okay, now you're coming up with really good answers. See, what are some of the possible scenarios in which we can't blame the reward system? If non-tenured faculty or a full-time professor, as someone really said, has the same reward system, or okay. Or if tenured faculty wasn't motivated, as someone also said, that they don't act as per the reward system, or if they're not motivated by the reward system. In either case, you can't really blame the reward system, or in either case, my conclusion breaks down. So if these scenarios break my conclusion down, then what are my assumptions? My assumptions are that non-tenured faculty, they do not have that does not have an identical reward system, or a majority of tenured professors, they care about the reward system. Okay. That's very important. Now, can you see how once you follow this process, you can come up with scenarios in which the conclusion breaks down? Can you see that? And this is the same process you're going to follow in every assumption question. In fact, we're going to adapt this process in for evaluate questions as well, for those of you really do this. Now, how many of you, when you look at this and saying, are worried about timing and think, man, this is a lot more analysis than what I thought I would need to do in an assumption question? How many of you are concerned about timing? You are, okay. It's time intensive. Some of you are saying I have to do more examples to see. Yes. And the thing that I'll tell you is pre-thinking is going to take you longer initially, but then once you get to it, it'll save you a ton of time. All right. And I'm going to provide some evidence. But before that, let me ask this. For how many of you this seems like a very different way to approach CR questions than what you've seen elsewhere? Right? For you, it's a very different way. And one of the things that you will see at e-GMAT is we'll back everything with data and everything with results. Okay, and this is some data that which is GMAT Club data, which talks about the number of 700 plus scores that have been reported on GMAT Club. And the reason why I share GMAT Club data is because on GMAT Club, every 700 plus score has to be reported and verified using an actual score report link, which is kind of the same thing that you send to business schools. All right. And this year we've reported most 700 plus scores. In fact, we've reported about 20-25x more 700 plus scores than anyone else. In fact, the closest that has come to us is TTP. That's about half as many 700 plus scores as well. Now, the other thing which is there is that increase from last year. This is comparing e-GMAT in 2020. This was the data till 15th of October. So it's about a month old. And e-GMAT in 2021, this increase also has been the highest for us. For most other prep companies, that number has been very, very similar. Okay. Also, when you slice and dice, and I know many of you are aiming for those high scores, and you look at more, not just most 700 plus scores, but most 730 plus scores, most retake stories, or most 100 plus point score improvements, you're going to see that we've been the leader over there. And the reason why we've been the leader is because our methods are very different. And in fact, you can see a few more partners, GMAT Club partners here, and you can see the number of 700 plus scores that have been reported in 2021. And you can go and verify this. Why? Because GMAT Club lists these scores in a chronological order in this case. Now, the reasons why this is there is because our methods are unique, and because if you teach the same methods, you get very similar results. Okay. Now, how are you going to feel with regards to pre-thinking? Because you will feel not great, initially at least. Okay. So I'm going to take an example of a student. Let's say you are this guy whose time to answer questions is medium and whose accuracy on assumption questions is in that low range. The first thing that's going to happen over here is that as you start doing pre-thinking, your accuracy will go up. So you're going to go towards point number 2. But your time to answer questions is also going to go up. So you're going to go in this direction, and you're going to be like this guy over here who's asking him, who's sweating and saying, why the hell am I following pre-thinking? I worry about timing. And one of the other things that you'll learn in the webinar, which I do next week, is the GMAT's not a test of timing. It's a test of process. In fact, the slower you go, the faster you solve on the GMAT. And so this is the point where many of you will have that temptation to quit. This is the point where your strength of character is going to be tested. And if you continue to trust pre-thinking, what you're going to find is that an inflection point will come, and your accuracy will continue to go on increasing. That's something that's going to happen. Why? Because with pre-thinking, you're spending more time understanding the argument. With pre-thinking, you make sure that you learn more from every question that you solve if you're doing it right, that is. And you're going to find that a time will come when your accuracy continues to go up, but the time to answer question suddenly drops. And you can see this curve over here. So this is where there's this horizontal line, and it's going to happen like this. And you're going to say, now I understand pre-thinking. And this is where you've gone beyond the hysteresis point, and this is where you will never not do pre-thinking, because you've seen the benefits of pre-thinking. And as you continue to do that, you will continue to what I call as, get most questions right, but you'll continue to make mistakes. And those are the questions that you're going to learn most from. Shubham asked this question early on. In some questions, I'm unable to pre-think. What do I do? Shivam was at point number 3 over here. And there are others who've gone through this process. I'm sure there are a few e-GMATers who've gone through this process and have gone from point 2 to 3. There are some folks who've actually struggled at point 2 and have given up. And I think they can vouch for both these segments exist here, even in this session, and they can vouch for the process from going from 2 to 3 and or the struggle at 2. And it's this strength of character. And in addition to using the right process, it's that strength of character that determines whether you become that 730, 740 student, or whether you'll remain at a 650 level or so. Okay. Does that help, by the way? And have you guys experienced this process? Some of you at least. Some of you have not tried pre-thinking, but I'm sure some of you currently at 2. Yes. So this is 1 to 2 is a very natural process. Anyone has gone from 2 to 3 and has experienced that reduction in time? Okay, how do you tackle questions that are complex on topics such as political science, Marxism? So first of all, there aren't very many political science topics that happen in critical reasoning. All right, I've not seen Marxism in critical reasoning. In reading comprehension, yes, not in critical reasoning. But even if it comes, it doesn't mean it won't come. The logic is going to be fairly simple. Again, if you see an unfamiliar topic, slow down. That's what I would say. And you'll see some of it in this session. And here's some evidence of folks who've done this. Is one of our students who's got a 740. He says, understand the passage, that's most important. Take your time. Equally important, pre-think an answer before looking at the answer choice. Probably this one word will have the most impact on your GMAT score. Okay. There's a guy who was currently studying at Booth, one of our former students who struggled, had a 35th percentile in critical reasoning, and then he improved that to a 97th percentile in about 15 days. Okay. For him, this was a key thing. He says, answer CR questions as if there are no answer choices. And pre-thinking is a game changer. And he says, when it gets to that 700 level questions, you have to do pre-thinking. Why? Because you want to make sure that you will focus on the logic and do not deviate from out of scope answer choices. Okay. Another guy who scored a V44, if I remember correctly, had a 220-point improvement. It says, pre-thinking primes the mind and we constantly on our toes while reading a paragraph or CR question stem. So again, pre-thinking is very, very important even in reading comprehension. Apart from comprehending the passage, we keep on speculating that in which direction the passage will orient or what logical jump has the author taken. Okay. So again, I'm going to be happy to share those links with you. You'll get those links in the PDF as well. So how long does it take to go from 2 to 3? The answer depends on how diligent you are with regards to revising your mistakes. A lot of people think they solve more questions, they're going to actually improve faster. How many of you think that over here? If you solve more questions, you're going to improve faster. Just simple yes, no. Okay. What is the truth? What is the actual truth, you think? How do you improve faster? Yes. Error log is key. How many of you are, just a generic yes, no, how many of you have subscribed to our YouTube channel? Just a simple yes, no over here. Just did, okay, good. So, our YouTube channel is the world's largest collection of GMAT journeys. And when I say world's largest, it has about 15 times as many GMAT journeys as pretty much any other YouTube channel, including GMAT Club's YouTube channel. Okay. And one of the things that you're going to really see, you're going to see we actually post between 1 and 2 success stories every week. We try to space them out. And And one of the things you're going to see that's constant is in each of those success stories is that people do not solve questions, a whole lot of questions. Rather, they focus on revising their mistakes. And even when they get it right, they focus on revising. So the typical ratio is that you spend 3 times as much time revising a question, at least 3 times, as you do solving it if you get it wrong. If you get it right, spend twice as much time doing that. You do that, you're going to improve a lot faster. Okay. So again, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're going to see this again and again. You're also going to see stuff which is importance of data and importance of using the right methods to solve questions. Okay. So how long will it take? You can get there in as few as 10 questions if you spend more time revising those questions. Revising as in checking the official answer key, as in revising as in ensuring that you selected the right answer for the right reasons, revising as in ensuring that you visualize the argument the right way. And if you are an e-GMATer, you know what we're talking about because there's a reason we give you super comprehensive answer choices. Okay. Can I give any tips on error logs? No, an error log is a 3-hour long session. And if you're an e-GMATer, you know that because we give you, so many examples that are very, very specific. So I'm going to touch a bit upon the architecture of what a good error log should be as you guys solve questions. But error log by itself is a 3-hour long session. And again, this is not, your error log where you say, oh, I did not see this, that's why I made a mistake. Those error logs are not as useful. Our error logs are behavioral error logs or causative error logs where we talk about why you made a mistake, which behavior caused you to make a mistake. Okay. Now with that, we're going to solve another question. This is an official question. It's a question in which if you do not pre-think, it'll confuse the hell out of you. Okay. It's an argument that seems very, very, very simple, but if you don't pre-think, you're gonna struggle with this. So just take about 3 minutes, go slow, follow the pre-thinking process, and you're gonna be able to get to the correct answer with 100% confidence. On the other hand, if you do not pre-think, you're gonna find a bunch of answer choices that sound correct. It also is a beautiful learning exercise. Okay, so with that, let's solve this question. Here's the question. All right, another 20 seconds, get those answers in. Five, four, three, two, and one. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. So, but choices B and E are very popular. Choices C and D are also reasonably popular. How was this? How did it feel when you were looking at answer choices? How did it feel? Okay, tricky, confused. Complex, very close, a bit complicated, okay. How many of you referred back to the original definition of what an assumption is? How many of you did that? Let's just do a yes/no poll. How many of you did looked at the definition of what an assumption is? Okay. Whenever you are, as I said earlier in the session, whenever you are confused, go back and say, what's an assumption? That's it. That's the ultimate truth out there. Okay. So this is an argument which epitomizes what complex questions are, where the argument's fairly simple. It's actually very simple. But if you don't pre-think, if you don't focus on attention on the core idea, your answer choices can have multiple assumptions and multiple strengtheners, not multiple assumptions, I'm sorry, multiple strengtheners. In this particular case, you have 4 strengtheners in the options, and your brain goes haywire. It's like, why the hell is D not an assumption, or E or B, and how the hell do I choose between them? So, but if you do pre-thinking, you get to the correct answer very easily. All right. So what's going on over here? All right. So we've got to finance roads, and to do that, that's what this is the goal. The Highway Commission is really saying, hey, we got to increase the toll on highways, and that's a proposal that's put in place. And the highway commissioner, who's an individual, again, a person, claims that, hey, this toll increase, this 50% toll increase, will increase the annual revenue generated by at least 50% per year. And the author says, or the question says, when making that claim, what assumption does the highway commissioner make? So that's what you've got to figure out. What is it that the highway commissioner is assuming that when he does that? Okay. Now let's just visualize the conclusion. So again, as I said, you always put in numbers. The conclusion is the annual revenue generated by the highway will go up by at least 50%, which means if the annual revenue last year was $1 million, and let's put the dollar sign, then the annual revenue this year would be at least 50%. So I'm going to just say 1.6 million. You might want to say 2, you might want to say 3, doesn't matter, but it should go up by at least 50%. That's really, really important for you to do. You could do 10 million or 100 million, doesn't matter as to what you take as a starting annual revenue. As long as you visualize those numbers, that's important. Then the next question is, how do we estimate annual revenue? How do we estimate annual revenue here, given the information in the argument? Again, don't get the answer choices in here. How do we estimate annual revenue? Toll per mile multiplied by total number of miles or total distance. That's how we estimate annual revenue, right? Annual revenue is toll per mile multiplied by total number of miles that are traveled on toll. Everyone good with this? Was everyone able to do this? Okay. All right, pretty much everyone was able to do this. A couple of you weren't, but more or less everyone was able to do this. How do we get this? Because we are given that we pay 10 cents per mile toll. And so if you're paying 10 cents per mile, then your revenue is, hey, total number of miles that are traveled multiplied by the toll per mile. And here is a reason over here. Didn't take enough time to fully think about it. Okay. If you're someone who did not take enough time to fully think about it, then what's your first corrective action over here? What's your first corrective action if you didn't take enough time to think about it? You're going to go read slowly. Someone who thought about profits, you're going to think, read more slowly. Visualize this. Forget about what confused you in the answer choice. So you're not even reading the argument, right? There's no answer choice here. You made the mistake. And which that's the value of having solutions that are systematic and that are thorough. You kind of figure out what's the first thing you need to fix. And in your case, you need to fix how to read the argument. The answer choices don't even are not even there in your purview right now. Okay, so let's move forward and then really say, okay, my annual revenue is toll per mile multiplied by the total number of toll miles. All right. So I asked the pre-thinking question: under what circumstances would the annual revenue not increase by 50%, given that I already know that toll per mile is going to go up by 50%? How many of you were not able to formulate this question? How many of you weren't able to formulate this question? Ask yourself, is this complex? Is formulating this question complex? No, it's not complex. Is this complex? I mean, you want to solve world problems in an MBA. Is formulating this question complex? No. It's what we've learned. Don't go to drivers. We are not there with answer choices, guys. Hold on. The procedure to approach, like getting annual revenue formula. Why? You don't even need a procedure to approach. Your argument says 10 cents per mile. There is no procedure here. You have to just read the argument slowly. If you're paying 10 cents per mile, then essentially this is the formula. I mean, do you ever really question yourself, how much, how would you figure out the amount of money required to buy 10 packs of biscuits if you know how much you're going to pay for 1 pack of biscuit? Do you ever question yourself on that? That's the same thing here. Is it not? You're given how much? Yeah, it's the same logic, yes. You have to read slowly. Okay, let's go back to this. Under what circumstances? This is going to be up by 50%. Toll per mile is going to be up by 50%. Under what circumstances would the annual revenue not go up by 50% if you know that the toll per mile is going to go up by 50%? If the total number of miles go down, you have a product of two entities, first entity is going to go up by 50%. What is the scenario in which this is not going to go up by 50%? Only if this goes down over here. Okay, that's the only scenario. So what's the assumption? If this is a falsifying scenario, your assumption is that the total number of miles driven does not increase. Yeah, again, don't go to total distance because we are talking about miles here. I know the answer choice says total distance, but again, over here at this point, we're just going to write down. We're not going to try and invent new words. The question says miles. We're going to stay in miles over here and then keep it. Okay. So far, anything complex? No, nothing complex. Right? Now let's talk about the confusing part in answer choices. Now, before I go to answer choices, let's kind of understand what is the definition of an assumption? What is the definition of an assumption? And why not number of miles times the number of drivers times rate per mile? Why complicate things? Keep things simple. That's why. Again, you're bringing the answer choice in there. Do not bring the answer choice. There's a reason that the definition of pre-thinking is the ability to think one assumption in 15 seconds before you look at answer choices. Do not bring answer choices in your pre-thinking. Okay. Unstated. So what's the definition of an assumption? It's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Now let's look at choice B. Okay, and forgive me for this. I'm going to, so choice B is this thing over here. This is your choice B. It says the total number of trips, right? What does choice B say? The total number of trips will not decrease from the current level. So let's kind of visualize this. All right. So let me get my keyboard here. What it's saying is last year, if we had 1,000 trips, it's really important to visualize the answer choice. This year, I'll get at least 1,000 trips. So I may get 1,050, but it would not be below 1,000. Is that must be true? Do we need that to be true? What if this year you have 900 trips? Will the total number of miles go down? If you have 900 trips this year, will the total number of miles go down? No. What can compensate? The trips can be longer or shorter. So even when you have 900 trips, some of those trips could be much longer. That may compensate for the reduced miles. So is this must be true? Is choice B, does it satisfy the must be true condition? No. People who chose choice B, where did you guys falter? What do you think you did not do? Trips does not equal miles. So in your case, the person who says trips do not equal miles, in your case, you did not visualize the answer choice. This is what would go in your error log. When you see an answer choice, visualize and put it back in the argument. Really important. Okay, if you really say miles and trips are different, that's not your error log. All right, your error log is I did not spend my time visualizing the answer choice, because that's a behavioral issue. It's going to come up in multiple contexts. If you fix that behavior, you're going to fix that issue. You're going to be much better in critical reasoning. Okay. Does that make sense? Everyone is clear why choice B is not a must be true? Okay. So a correct answer is choice E. Choice E talks about total distance. Total distance is the same as the number of miles, right? And you can see the math over here in this case. So again, as I said, I'm going to ask you to remember two statements. One's the definition of, once the falsification question, the second is a definition of what an assumption is. That's all. And again, you ask yourself what is must be true. Once you have that, you have your answer. Okay. Choice C. Let's talk about average length of the trip. Why is that not must be true? Because people did choose choice C. What can compensate for average length of the trip? If it goes down from 20 miles to 12 miles, the total number of trips, actually B and C are complementary. Okay. If the average length of the trip goes down from 10 miles to 8 miles, then you can have, 50% more trips. Again, choice C is a great strengthener. It's not a must be true. Okay. Doubt on any other answer choice. Any other answer choice here? Before I go to the next question. What about D? All right. Number of drivers who constantly avoid the toll highway by using will not increase from its current levels. If let's say, and let's say earlier, 50 drivers avoided the toll highway. Now that number is 60. Okay, let's visualize this. What could compensate? The remaining drivers could take longer trips, right? Other drivers could drive more, other drivers could take more trips or longer trips. So either B or C could compensate. Okay. New drivers could also come in. Yes. Right? So choice D, is that clear to everyone? Right? Yes, you're thinking something wrong. What is the conclusion about? What is the conclusion about? Is the commissioner claiming that, hey, I'm going to generate enough money to fix road repairs? Is that what the commissioner is claiming? Is that his claim? No. Let's say you're doing a project and you tell your boss, let's take these 3 steps and the time to actually finish the project will come down by about 20%. Okay, and you do those 3 steps and the time to come down actually is 25%, but the project is still delayed, right? Should you be blamed for your recommendation? Should you be? Should you be blamed for your recommendation? You achieved that 25% reduction in the project. The project was still late, but you shouldn't be blamed for it. So if you chose choice A, then what should go in your error log? If you chose choice A? Anyone who chooses choice A, what should go in their error log? Can you tell me? Okay, too hasty. What specific information would you go? Forget about cost. Forgot the conclusion. Yes, make sure you understand the conclusion. Okay? Really important. Premise cannot be challenged. You're not challenging premises in choice A. There's no. Why do you think a premise is challenging choice A? Okay. Which premise do you think is challenged? There's nothing challenged in choice A. The argument says in order to finance road repairs. It doesn't really say, hey, that increase will finance 100% of road repairs. No, maybe there's a government subsidy coming in. Okay. The other piece, premises can be challenged. Factual premises cannot be challenged. Okay. Premises that are claims can absolutely be challenged. Or in other words, any claim in an argument, whether it's a premise or the main conclusion, can be challenged. What if we have other 20 cents per mile tickets? Don't we need to think about these? Why would you think about 20 cents per mile? What are 10 cents per mile tickets? There are no tickets. You're paying 10 cents per mile for travel. That's it. I mean, where did you get the notion of tickets? You're just increasing the price point blank. There's nothing this is, once it happens for everyone live. Okay. There are no other tickets apart from 10 cents per mile. Okay. Why would someone buy those 20 cents per mile anyway? Okay. How many of you buy gas? How many of you drive over here? Okay. How many you do? Has the price of gasoline gone up? Or has the price of electricity gone up if you buy? Yes. Do you still buy gasoline? Do you still buy gasoline? Yes. So why would someone buy this? Because they still have to reach their destinations. Again, very different topic of how essential services are exploited, but yeah, not in scope of what we're talking about here. Okay, but you're given 10 cents per mile. You don't go. One of the key things with regards to arguments is to remain in scope, to understand what's given, and the logic that the author is testing. GMAT critical reasoning arguments don't expect you to bring your own knowledge into the argument. Okay, they expect you to be within a very tight framework, and for very good reason, because that's the kind of arguments you're going to have in organizations. It's probably the most important skill. In fact, many of our former students who are consultants, they actually tell us that the pre-thinking skills that they learned over here, an extension of that goes into the consulting projects that they do as McKinsey consultants or as Bain consultants for clients. Okay. With that, we're going to up the gear now. We're going to solve more difficult questions. This already was a 700 level question, but we're going to solve way more difficult questions. Are you guys ready to get there? Are you guys ready to solve more difficult questions? Okay. Um, let's do that. So here's what I want to do as we solve these difficult questions. I don't want to time you guys. So the way we are going to do this is where I want you to select this not answered over here right now. I want about 40 people to select not answered. And then once, you guys choose an answer choice other than not answered. So that way I would know that, you guys are done. So when 80% of you are done, I'm going to call time. So that way I don't time you, you guys time yourself. Okay. Again, these are difficult questions. These are questions which you would get if you are in that 95th, 97th percentile range. So even when you get them wrong, even when you have no idea how to go about doing this, don't worry about it. Consider them as an excellent learning exercise because you're going to learn a lot from these questions. Okay. So with that, here is your first question. Make sure you have a pen and paper ready. Make sure you have you've had water so that you don't rush through this and go through them very slowly. Write things down. Okay. Here is your first question. I'm going to mute myself. Good luck, guys. All right, guys, get those answers in. Five, four, three, two, and one. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. And this is a crazy question, which is very, very easy if you focus on doing pre-thinking, but it's going to drive you crazy if you don't. So don't kill yourself for it if you had no idea what was going on in this question. But with that, let's kind of do the next. The next question is a lot easier. So so the next question we're gonna oops. Can you please put your answers in once again? I by mistake. I'm going to reopen the poll, put the answers in once again. So this is the same RDS Technologies question. So please put the poll once again so that we preserve your answers. And my apologies, I I um I actually cleared that. Put your answers in once again for RDS Technologies. You can see this says 3.2 RDS Technologies, which is the same question. I want to make sure we preserve those answers because for some reason I cleared the poll. All right. With that, I'm going to end the poll. And again, you don't change your answers because I can tell you the majority didn't do it right. That's something I can tell you. This is one of those questions. So if you were a minority, you might have answered it correctly. If you're changing your response, then again, as I said, there are no brownie points for getting questions right here. There are only brownie points for learning. Okay, I'm going to end this poll. And then let's get to the next question. Yes, here is the next question. Again, we'll do the same thing. Shelby will refuse. This is the next question. I want you to select not answered. 40 people to select not answered. And yes, Abhi, you will get the recording on YouTube. Okay. All right, we have more than 40 people who said not answered. This question is not as crazy. So good luck, guys. Solve this question. All right, guys, 15 more seconds. Close to 80% of you are done. So get those answers in. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Let's broadcast the results. So I'm going to put in the short answer part once again so you guys can tell me how you felt about this particular question. How did this one feel? Okay, both of them are 700 level questions, by the way. Both of them are 700 level questions. So if you felt it was, the second one was also challenging, don't kill yourself. It's a difficult question. Okay. Could pre-think, that's good. Pre-thinking saved the day. So some of you, again, this shows some of you are further ahead on the curve than others. And again, those who are not ahead shouldn't feel bad about themselves. Let me just say this, okay? Those people who are further ahead may be doing, may have been studying for longer or may have studied for longer than you have. What's important is that you judge yourself on your own progress. What's important is that you progress. Okay, being at the same point in this session is not as important as learning or understanding what I'm talking about and asking good questions. Okay, with that, let's get to this particular one. This one's, as I said, it's a difficult question. Okay, so let's look at this. And again, some of you may find the second one harder, as one of you said, and that's absolutely okay. It's a lot of this is very personal, and I can tell you this, that at e-GMAT we design a lot of questions and I've designed upwards of 700 critical reasoning questions, and I can tell you, even after designing 700 CR questions, when it comes to assigning a difficulty level, I'm only correct 70% of the time. So it's just because difficulty level depends on your own personal context in this case. Okay. One says, do I recommend doing pre-thinking and all type of CR questions? Yes, we do that. Okay. Let's come back to the conclusion. All right. The conclusion here is very simple: to identify the number of V's. Complex terms I prefer not to read. The number of, I won't call these word landers, I just said number of V's receiving special program information did not increase significantly. Okay. So what this is saying is so I think before I kind of go to visualize, I want to just make some observations. The first thing that I want to talk about is this conclusion is only about V's. Okay, so it's not talking about people who are not from V. The second thing is the conclusion's only about special program information. Okay, it's not about programs in general. It's not about anything that doesn't have an SPI or a special program information related to it. The third thing is it's about the increase in the number of people. Okay, very, very important that this is about the increase, which means that if the number of people were in 94 were 10K, then what we are saying is the number of people in 96 are more or less 10K around. So this is more or less the same thing in this case. Okay, if there were 100K, there are 100K. If there were, a million, then in 94, then there are also a million in 96. Again, this also shows the time frame. This is a fairly old question. And it talks about radios. No one listens to radios now. Also talks about, and you can see it's a fairly old question, but the relationship, the logic here could apply to cell phones just as easily. Okay. Now, 3 things about the conclusion. Can you guys observe this over here from this? It's about people from Verlander. We're not worried about people who come from outside. It's about people, special program. We're not worried about general purpose programs, which don't have a special component. And the third thing is it's about the increase, and they say there is really no increase, more or less the number remains the same. So let's kind of see how the author arrives at this conclusion. Okay, so you have the main conclusion over here. Now, what's supporting this? The fact is that the number of radios, which is radios that you guys, people, consumers have in their houses, that remain the same in 94 as in 96. So if there were 1,000 radios in 94, there were 1,000 radios in 96. There were 10,000 or hopefully 100,000 because there were so many transmitting stations. So if there were 100,000 in 94, there were 100,000 in 96 as well. Now, the number of transmitting stations, which these are stations that transmit radio programs, that went from 250 to 600. So the way I would read it is that number more than doubled. Okay, the precise 250 and 600 is not as important, but the fact that it's in hundreds and it doubled is important for me. Now, this is a very peculiar structure that I want to make sure that you understand. There's a word however connecting these two. And when you see however connecting two statements, this means one seems to go against the other. And truly that's the case. Statement 3 does seem to be counter to statement 2 in some way. Why? Because if you expect the number of stations to go up, you also expect the number of radios to go up as well. It's a logical expectation, but there's a however, which means that that really did not happen. The number of radios more or less remain the same. The other piece is, if you know that 3 is supporting my main conclusion and it's connected by however to 2, there's a good chance, even without reading the content of 2, that 2 is kind of going against the conclusion. And when you look at the content of 2, you can confirm that this seems to go against the conclusion. Why? Because if you have more transmitting stations, you'll assume that more people should be receiving special program information. So far, so good. Does it make sense? You guys are with me, right? Statement number 1 sets the context. It's a very important context. What it says is that, hey, radio stations which have this special RDS technology, they broadcast the special program information. This broadcasts the special information that if you have a radio with an RDS feature, only that radio can receive that. Or, the way I would think about this is, hey, these are, if you talk about in the context of call, these are stations that's giving you caller ID, and if your phone has a caller ID receiving feature, you not only get a call, but you also get the caller ID with that. If in today's world, receiving a phone call makes sense, but yeah, that's kind of what it is in today's world. Okay, so let's kind of do a logical structure. What the author is saying is, between 1994 to 96, very few additional Vs received RDS programs. Why does the author say that? Because the number of radios that people had, they did not go up a whole lot, but the number of stations, these transmitting stations, just went up tremendously. And what the context is that to receive RDS programming, you need RDS radios. You also need the station to transmit that. Okay. All right. So far, so good. Before we go to the falsification question, you guys are with me? You understand the argument? All right. So we're going to really ask the falsification question. In what scenario will there be a significant increase, and that's really important, addition to the number of people receiving the special programming if we have almost the same number of radios but we have a lot of transmitting stations? And you can see how the negative and positive is what I'm doing this. Why is this positive? Why? Because this would aid the addition and this would actually go against the addition. So in what scenarios will we have more people receiving these special program information? What are the scenarios? If the number of people per radio were not more than before. Is that correct? Absolutely, that is correct. That's very good. The second thing, and you guys got both of them. They live in areas that did not receive a signal, but with this more stations, number 2, they now get the signal. Yes, the coverage piece. So there are 2 possible scenarios, and you guys came up with both of them. If the additional stations now cover areas, so again, remember, these are scenarios in which you break the conclusion down. The additional stations increase the coverage, which means they cover areas where there was no coverage, but where you have people with these kind of radios. The other thing is, if somehow we start putting these radios in Starbucks, if the people per radio went up. Can you see both of these break my conclusion down? Okay. Now, some people here also come up with this assumption in my previous session, that what if you could receive this special program information without the RDS radio? And that would not be a great way to critically think. Why? Because in critical thinking or critical reasoning, you don't go against facts. You can go against, as I said, premises, but not facts. And this is a fact that's given to you, that to receive RDS programming, you need the RDS radio. So don't question that fact. Take that as a constraint that's given to you. Okay. Now, if these are the scenarios that break my conclusion down, then my assumptions are the new radio station should not increase the coverage significantly, or people per radio should remain about the same. Okay. That's basically it. Now, what if you could get special program from other than RDS radio? No. Does the argument really talk about that? Does the argument talk about that? No. Think about the context that the argument's built in. That's very important. Okay. Really important to think about that context and do this. Okay. What if you already own the RDS radio? You're accounted for over here. All right. So far so good. We are good with these assumptions. How many of you were able to come up with one of these assumptions? Let's put in a yes no question. It doesn't matter if you were able to come up with one of these assumptions. But I want to figure out if you came up with one of these assumptions, and if you still got the question wrong, I want to figure out why did you get it wrong, and then we can put in the appropriate error log. Just put in yes if you were able to come up with one of these assumptions, and otherwise put no. And that's okay if you weren't able to. I mean, you know where you need to put in the effort. But if you were able to, then you need to know where you need to put in the effort as well if you made a mistake. If you didn't make a mistake, of course, that's wonderful. How many of you were able to come with at least one assumption? I've removed broadcast results, so don't stop putting answers in. I don't want anyone to feel bad. Although, I mean, this could be motivating. So I don't know. I only have 23 people who've responded. 24 now. 25. 26. 30. Who were able to come up with at least one when you were solving the question. Not right now, when you were solving the question. 3, 2, and 1. So, 67% of you say you were able to pre-think over here, those of you who've responded. And that's wonderful. If that is the case, then I want to kind of figure out why so that only like 15 to 20% of you were able to get the correct answer, if you were able to get to this. Okay. I'm going to go to the poll, and I want to show you how you guys did here. Not this one. RDS Technologies. And again, this is how you guys did. Okay. Only 4 people chose choice A despite being able to pre-think. And I want you to tell me, for those of you who were able to pre-think, what your error log would be, because choice A is my correct answer. Choice A says, few if any of the RDS radio stations that began broadcasting after 94 broadcast to people with RDS equipped radios living in areas not previously reached by RDS stations. So let's kind of look at this. Few if any. Few if any means almost none. Okay. I told you don't do that. Of the RDS radio stations that began broadcasting after 94, these are the new radio stations. Broadcast to people with RDS equipped radios. It means these people already had the right kind of radios, living in areas not previously reached. What does that mean? Increase the coverage of RDS programming. Basically, what this is saying is almost none of the new stations increase the coverage of RDS programming. Okay, which is what we came up with in our pre-thinking here. New stations, no significant increase in coverage. If you do and which is the correct answer. If you do the negation test, you say at least some radio stations increase coverage. If at least some radio stations increase coverage, then can we really say that the number of people receiving special programming information, that number hasn't gone up a whole lot? No, we can't say that, and my conclusion breaks down. So I know I'm going to discuss every other answer choice, but choice A, can you really see why this is the correct assumption, and how if you negate it, it breaks the conclusion down? If you have these new stations, they're now doing this. If they increase the coverage, then you can't really say that. If your pre-thinking was no one else bought the radio after 94, then again you are listing what's given as a more or less a fact. Okay. So after thinking the assumption, my mind was looking only for something along those lines and blocking from everything else. How do I rectify that? What are you not doing? That's a great point. I want you to read this. After thinking the assumption, my mind is looking for something only along those lines and blocking everything else. What is it that you're not doing as that particular person? What behavior is wrong there? You are actually not reading the answer choices. You are not visualizing them. Right? You're not visualizing the answer choices. You have the ability to do that, but you're not doing that. The moment you change that behavior, you're going to see your ability go up. Okay. If you could not come up with pre-thinking, then, again, as I said, this is a difficult question. It was difficult to come up with pre-thinking over here. So again, you got to go back to the course and you have to learn pre-thinking, or you have to maybe learn inference to begin with, because inference tells you how to visualize single statements. And then you have to go towards argument. I think each one of you is at a different stage. And that's kind of where going through the course methodically helps, because the course starts with inference, then it goes into easier arguments, then more complex or so. As I said in the beginning, this is a very difficult question. Don't kill yourself if you don't get it. If you got it, if you got the reasoning, that's excellent. Give yourself a pat on the back. But others should realize they have a longer journey and they should be willing to go through that journey. Again, it doesn't matter where you are today. What matters is, can you chart that journey towards success? And are you willing to put in that effort to get that high GMAT score? You want to kill yourself for not standing on your ground? You should. Not literally though, but write down the learning. I mean, imagine this, right? How many of you are aiming for that 730 plus score? That's 95 percentile or higher, right? Which means you're gonna be answering questions that a majority, the answer choices that you'd be choosing are not the ones that are going to be the most popular ones, right? So you have to stand out of the crowd. That's statistically the case. I mean, that's why you're aiming for that 730. Okay. This is how people polled. This is how you guys polled. A is correct, yes. All right, let's look at why others are wrong and what can you learn from them. So let's look at choice B. Forget about choice A now. Remember, every answer choice has its own entity. All right. So forget about choice A. What is an assumption? What is an assumption? What's the definition of an assumption? Can you guys tell me? It's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Okay. Now, the question that we're going to ask ourselves is this must be true? Okay. Is this must be true? Okay. So let's kind of read this here. What is my conclusion here? My conclusion is that the number of people who were receiving the special program information did not change between 94 and 96. If there are 1,000 people in 94, there are 1,000 people in 96. There were 10,000 people in 94. There were 10,000 people in 96. Okay. Now let's read this answer choice. In 1996, most Verlanders who lived within the listening area already had a radio equipped to receive RDS. Let's visualize this. What does the word most mean? What does the word most mean? Greater than 50%, right? Most could be 60%, most could be 70%. Let's take most as 60%. Very simple. Let's take this most to be 60%. Okay. Everyone good with me taking most as 60% to explain the logic? Yes? Right? Good. Now, let's go back to the conclusion and let me ask you this question. The conclusion said that the number of Verlanders who are receiving the special program information, remain more or less the same. Now, my question to you is, do I require that 60% of Verlanders have special program information for that conclusion to hold true? Do I need that? Or in other words, what if 20% of Verlanders had these radio sets in 94, and the same 20% also had that in 96? Would my conclusion still not hold true? It would, right? The conclusion would still hold true. So you don't need most. You don't need most, and which is why this answer choice is not must be true. Again, remember, the conclusion is about the change in number of listeners from 94 to 96, not the absolute number in 94 or in 96. And understanding that is really important. Okay, people who chose choice B, can you see how this fails the must be true test? You don't need most. Right? Can you see that? How it fails the must be true test? Okay, I don't see a lot of answers coming in. Got it? Good. Now, if you got this wrong, and if you really wrote in your error log, hey, I got this wrong because of this one word, that would be the wrong entry. What you have to write in your error log is, I did not visualize this statement. I got to do a better job visualizing this statement and then understanding what my conclusion is about. Choice C, not many people chose choice C. Choice C talks about the impact that you have on a radio station when you add the RDS technology to it. Now, what the argument tells us is that, hey, you need RDS technology for RDS programming. So even if it reduces the station's listening area, it doesn't matter. Okay. Let's look at choice D. Choice D was very popular, and choice D should have been one of the easiest ones to reject. And so if you chose choice D, you have to really figure out how to read answer choices better and relate it to the conclusion. Choice D says, in 1996, Verlanders who did not own radios equipped to receive RDS. Are we concerned about people who don't have the right radio? Are we? No. Could not receive any programming. Is my conclusion concerned about any programming? No, it's concerned about RDS programming from the radio stations that began to broadcasting after 94. Okay. Again, we don't care about people who don't have RDS radios. We don't care about any programming. And in the past, when I've done this question, some people have told me, they said the reason I chose this answer choice was I couldn't figure out which one's correct. And I saw this word any, and I have been told any is a really popular word in answer choices. I don't know if any one of you did that, but they say, hey, any is a very safe word. Some is a very safe word in critical reasoning answer choices. So choose an answer choice that has any or some. Reject answer choices that have all. Is there anyone who did something like this over here and said, hey, I chose this because I saw could not receive any programming over here, and so this seemed safe to me? Okay, if you've never heard of that, good job. Don't hear this either. That doesn't work. Okay, great. So another thing that I will tell you is, if you solve question, then you see comments such as, hey, reject answer choices that have most or all, or what I call as superlative, or the equivalent of complete sets, then reject those as those are not likely correct answers. Yes, statistically true, but there are many questions in which they are. So don't apply stats to CR or even SC. Okay, very similar myth, being is wrong in SC, really bad recommendation. Please explain one of D. So one really says it discusses people who did not own RDS radios. Okay, what's given to us, if you don't own an RDS radio, you can't receive RDS programming. So is this information, does this provide any new information to me? Does this answer choice provide any new information to me? You already know that, right? And we don't care about this. We don't care about people who do not have RDS radius. Do we care about them? When you were reading the argument, did you worry about them? No. So anything about that group doesn't matter. Could you have eliminated radius being a factor? Absolutely. You could have eliminated by saying, hey, this is talking about a group of people that has no relationship to the conclusion. And you could have just eliminated it right then and there. Okay. The kind of programming, of course, doesn't matter. So, what did you learn from this conclusion, from this question? What's been the learning? Visualize answer choices, okay. What else? Read carefully, take time to pre-think assumptions. All right. So, good. These are all good answers. Understand the context. Good. Focus on cause and effect and ignore the rest. It's really important to understand what the conclusion is talking about. Otherwise, I mean, answer choices are designed to confuse you, and for good reason, right? Because they want to weed out people who understand and can reason properly from those who cannot. This is how you guys polled for shall be will refuse, and we're going to really look at this and visualize this. Okay. Now we're going to take visualization to the next level over here. So in this, the arguments on top, what happened last year? Last year, we did not burn any refuse. We did not recycle any refuse. We burned everything that was given to us. So let's assume one trash can is one truck. So how many trucks did we send for burning last year? Can you count the number of trash cans here? 10 trucks, yes. What are we going to do this year? We're going to send 5 trucks for burning. Okay, or we're going to reduce that number to half of last year's number. Now, I have a question for you. Now, if, and this is a really beautiful question, if this year, instead of getting the same amount of refuse, what if we collect 10 times as much refuse? So if this number here is 10x as much refuse, then how many trucks do you think we'll send for burning? If instead of collecting 10 trucks worth of refuse, if I collect 100 trucks worth of refuse, how many trucks do you think I'll send for incineration this year? And this is a test of your understanding, how well you read and translate that into action. If you collect 100 trucks worth of refuse, how many trucks will you send for incineration this year? 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end the poll and then broadcast the results. And as I was doing this, some people changed their answers, but you can really see that only a quarter of you who chose the correct answer, which is the answer is 5 trucks, despite selecting 100 trucks or collecting 100 trucks worth of refuse. And let's see why that is the case. This year, city services will separate for recycling enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads to half of last year's number. What we are saying is, regardless of how much garbage we collect, I'm only going to send half as many trucks as I sent last year. Even if I collect 1,000 truckloads worth of refuse, I'm only going to send half as many as I sent last year. So if last year I sent you 10, even if I collect 100 truckloads worth of refuse, I'm still going to send you 5. Why? Because 5 is half of last year's number. Can you guys see this? Read that statement again. And that's the beauty of reading slowly. Read slowly. Pre-think. That's very important. And that's why you don't want to read answer choices, because answer choices here are designed to confuse you. But if you pre-think, you cut through all of that clutter, because you don't have that answer choice information in your mind. You are only dealing with the argument. Okay. We have the structure. So, and let's go to the falsification question. The question is, and what scenario will the ash generated be greater than 50%? Remember, we're trying to falsify the conclusion, even if I only send half as many trucks for incineration. What is the scenario in which my conclusion will break down? In which the ash generated will be more than 50% if I only send half as many truckloads? What's the only scenario? What's the only scenario? If ash produced will be more for 5 trucks, yes. Or when would that happen? If, the ash produced per truckload is more, right? If every truckload or on a per truckload basis, the average ash produced is more. If ash per truckload is up. Or you can also say if ash produced will be more for 5 truckloads sent. That's also a good way of saying that. Okay, you can, rather than talking about a per truckload, you can talk about the combined quantity. It's one and the same thing. Can you see that this is the only possible scenario? Forget about recycle or not. We don't care about recycle. What is this conclusion about? Is this conclusion about recycling, or is this conclusion about ash? What is this conclusion about? Ash. I don't care about recycling. You may put it in a landfill. You may go dump it in an ocean. As long as you're not burning, that's I'm happy. Okay, really important. Okay, so the only assumption is ash per truckload is going to be very similar to or lower than what it was last year. It can't be greater than what it was last year. Well, thank you for the compliment. So let's look at the answer choices. Choice D is the correct one. Now here, the answer choices are very special here. This year, no material that city services would separate for recycling, none of that material would be incinerated. Now, this is a must be true statement. The problem is you can infer this from the argument. This does not provide any new information. Because of this is wrong. Okay. So for those of you who did the must be true test, you'd say that, hey, this passes the must be true test. But if that's why you chose this one, you forgot that the argument already tells us that. You can infer that. Okay. Choice B talks about cost. We don't care about cost in this argument. The conclusion has nothing to do with cost. Choice C talks about the proportion of recyclable material. We don't care about it, right? Okay. We don't care about it. Why? Because, hey, we are only sending half the truckloads. That's given to us. An inference can't be an assumption? Absolutely not. These are mutually exclusive entities. Inference is what's given to you. And an assumption is what's not given to you and what's must be true. So there's a mutual exclusion there. Okay. Choice C. Any doubts on choice C? Any doubts on this? Choice C? You should say no if there are no doubts. I think it helps. All right. Choice D is the correct answer. Choice D says the refuse incinerated this year will generate no more residual ash per truckload incinerated than did last year. Again, it's in line with our pre-thinking, and that's correct. Can I please explain choice C again? Yeah, choice C compares. First, understand what does choice C do. It says the refuse collected by city services will contain a larger proportion of recyclable materials this year than it did last year. So first of all, we don't know what it was last year. So that larger proportion doesn't do me any good. But then the second thing that I ask myself is, Does it even matter? Why? Because I'm only sending half as many truckloads. Forget about recyclable or not. Even if the proportion of recyclable material is half of what it was last year. It's not larger, it's not the same, it's half of what it was last year. Do I even care? Why? Because I'm only getting half as many truckloads to burn, and I only care about residual ash. Okay. Does that help? This is another great point. What if the refuse collected this is a different composition, and then can we say the ash generated would be more? Yes, absolutely. But where would that show up? And I think that's a great question, and I prefer the questions. So when someone asks such a good question, I prefer I announce their name. Mridul has a great Mridul. That was Mridul. So yes, and that's accounted for, Mridul, in this piece over here, because if the composition of the waste is different, if each kilogram of waste generates more ash, then the ash per truckload will also be higher. Okay, so that's also a good way of saying the same piece of information. Does that help, Mridul? So you're thinking in the right way. We did choice D. Let's look at choice E. The total quantity is in choice C. No, it's not. It's not stating different composition that leads to more ash. You can have a different composition. It shouldn't lead to more ash. Okay. Don't read the statements halfway. That will make you make mistakes. Choice E says the total quantity of refuse collected will be no greater this year than it was collected last year. Okay. Doesn't matter. No, you only get half as many truckloads. You did that experiment, right? Okay. What did you learn from this? What did you learn from this exercise? Read slowly again. You can see the lessons are the same. Pre-think. Keep the conclusion in mind and visualize the answer choices. Yes. CR doesn't require quick thinking. Remember this. Don't try to do quick thinking. The quick thinking piece will become naturally as you solve arguments, because the kind of logic doesn't change, and it's not rocket science. Let me say that. Okay. But it's about structured way of approaching a problem. That's what's really important. And which is why I say the first 10 to 12 questions, the first 15 questions, you're going to take longer because you're doing more things now. But that mental agility will come automatically as you continue to do more and more. Why? Because imagine this, right? You solve 10 questions. You will have already analyzed close to 70 to 80 statements, 50 of them belonging to answer choices, another 40 belonging to the argument itself. That's a lot of analysis if you do it right. On the other hand, if you choose to just answer questions and not analyze them, you would have analyzed 10 statements and 10 questions or 12 statements and 10 questions, and you wouldn't have learned as much. Okay. So that's very important. Okay. So again, takeaways. It's not rocket science, but it is. You need to be very, very structured, which is why you need to make sure you go through the prerequisites. Okay. So what stops you from attaining that 90th percentile? You're not able to, first of all, read the argument properly. And one of the things that stops you from doing that is if you don't classify the statements as, hey, which is the main conclusion, which is an intermediate conclusion, which are premises, which are anti-premises. The second thing is visualizing that conclusion is really important. You need to know the conclusion inside out. 50% of all mistakes happen because people don't visualize the conclusion. The next piece is people don't spend time doing pre-thinking, and people give up. When you're learning, starting to do pre-think, it's okay to spend just 2 minutes doing just this after you've read the conclusion. Why? Because there will be times where you'll have to go back and read the conclusion again, because nothing will come to your mind because you've not read the conclusion properly. And that's okay. Let me say that. That's okay. Don't measure the absolutes, measure the improvement or the relatives. As you measure the improvement, you're going to be able to get to the correct answer. You're going in less time than you are getting to it right now, and with much higher accuracy. And then the last piece, once you've done all of this, when you're analyzing the answer choices, don't throw it out. Take it along with you. Make sure you first read the answer choice, analyze it independently, and then put in that visualization that you've done. Really important. Each one of these 4 things needs to be in place for you to be able to answer questions correctly. Each one of these 4 things, if you don't do right, will lead to mistakes. Okay. So I'm going to really talk about some success stories which I'm going to share, and you're going to find that different people face different problems. But again, the key thing is, how do you improve? And the key for you to improve is to make sure you achieve high ability in NCR questions. Now, even people who scored 95th percentile, they make mistakes, and that's okay, because mistakes are where you learn from. I mean, this is a 95th percentile student who scored, his accuracy in hard questions was 65%. That's 95th percentile. However, accuracy in medium questions was 90%. You don't want to get medium questions wrong. Hard questions you will get wrong. They are designed to be hard. That's where learnings come in. Okay. So if you're an e-GMAT student, make sure you go through the premise and conclusion files. Just classifying statements, understanding them, that's about a 2-hour exercise or more. Get those 100% scores here. These evaluations are really important. Okay. How do you build an argument structure? Which is where the free session files are important. Again, this is about 3 to 4 hours of content here. Make sure you get to this. Really important. Get through this in a single go. Get those high scores here. There are lots of examples here. If you are a paid student, make sure you go through this entire exercise. Again, the reason we spend so much time and have close to 70 examples right here plus exercise questions is so that you learn 80% of what you need to learn when it comes to argument-based questions. Spend that time, make that investment. The moment you make that investment, you're going to find that life becomes a lot easier as you go from assumption to evaluate, evaluate to strengthen to weaken, and from there on to logically completes. Okay. Through these exercises, you're going to be able to fix each one of these 4 issues, and you're going to have enough practice around this. Again, if you go through this diligently, if you rush through it, you're going to find wanting even at the end of it. Okay. Here's an example of a guy who went from a 570 to 740, and someone who thought was very good logically. And this guy taught physics at an undergraduate level, and he says language has a way of manipulating your mind, and the GMAT's really good at using language to fool you. Again, you guys experienced this today. Spend that extra time to get there. Okay. So as next steps, start your pre-thinking journey. Really important. And with that, let me share the session presentation with you. And so here's a session presentation in this case. And the concept, you should do them in the free session here. But yeah, and here are some of the sessions that you can link to. And if you want to make sure that you solve questions, then subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not done that. And here are some of the success stories that you can watch as motivation. Also, for those of you who are starting your journey, make sure you take a Sigma X mock. Okay. Now, feedback on the webinar. If you want to give me some feedback on the webinar, that'd be wonderful. And you will also see the recording on YouTube, by the way, in about 10 hours or so, and we'll send the recording to you. If you have any other question, I'd be happy to answer that question at this point. Okay. With that, I want to thank you for joining me today. It was wonderful having you guys, and wish you good luck. Is it enough to study only from recorded videos? First of all, please don't call our courses recorded videos. These are, uh, purpose designed e-learning content that give you active feedback. My answer to you is, do you think if you get about 100 points of personalized feedback and critical reasoning, you'd be able to do this? If the answer to that is yes, then that's something which is there. Do you think a company that has delivered 20x as much success as the average, company that delivers live session, is that evidence enough? If the answer to that is yes, then yes. So yeah, I mean, take a look at the free trial. Is there any way you could get mentored as your exam is on 30th? So I think if you are in that 680 plus range, we can mentor you. The reason there's no mentorship before that is because it's not useful. I mean, you have to go through the course to get to a 70th percentile in anything. You have to go through the course and then do cementing. I mean, there is very little that a mentor would add for you. Forget about one of working with any of our strategy team. Even if you work with us, what we will tell you is that you've got to go through these lessons. You've got to hit those high ability scores. Remember, mentors are not private tutors. No, mentors tell you what you need to do, and that's very clear for you. Only once you hit 70th percentile, that's when a mentor can tell you this is where your strengths are, this is where your weaknesses, and can build you that custom revision plans. Even then, no mentor teaches you. Okay, really important. So again, if you need help in the last 20 days, last 10 days, write to us and really say, hey, for example, if you're at a 680 and you want to get to a 720, we may write to us and we can tell you that study plan. Absolutely. You don't, you need that study plan, and we'll be happy to provide that. If you're at a 600 and you say, help me get to 700 in 10 days, no one can help you get there. And it's very difficult to get there from 600 to 700. I mean, you need about 100 hours of effort. And unless and until you're a very robust test taker, you're not likely to get there. 680 to 720 in last 10 days? Yes, possible if you put in the effort, yes. But you've got to prove to us that you're at 680 through the metrics internally. Don't tell us I've taken a GMAT prep mock just because GMAT Club has put all those questions out there. We no longer trust GMAT prep mocks because half the people who come to us with them have had solved questions previously. Those mocks are very well designed. It's just that those questions are out there. So yeah. You are in the 700 range as per the module you purchased, experts clue. Well, again, I do not trust that. Just take a Sigma X mock. If you want to prove to us, take a Sigma X mock. We have provide a free mock. And then if you need mentorship, then we can do that if you're at a 700 level. Absolutely, yes. Okay. And again, you can write to me at rajat@e-GMAT. Our support team gets that automatically. Is it really tough to improve 200 points? No, it's not. The piece which is there, I think you've got to understand is it's not about improving by 200 points. It's about, the person who improves from a 650 to a 740 has to improve from a 30th percentile to a 90th percentile in two subsections. The person who goes from a 500 to a 740 has to take the same journey in 7 to 8 subsections. The journey is the same. It's just that you've got to take that journey multiple times or more times if you're going to go from a 500 to a 740 versus if you want to go from a 650 to a 740. So it's not more difficult. It of course requires more hours because you have to take more journeys. Would a similar session happen for other topics, SC and RC? We had an RC session last weekend. We have a strategy session, and then I think the following week, so in about 2 weeks, you'll have the SC session. All right. Okay, guys, with that, you know how to get in touch with me if you have questions. So feel free to write to me. And I want to thank you guys for joining me today. It was wonderful having you. You guys participated really well. Thank you very much. And yeah. it makes sense to learn different categories of CR and RC. Yes, I mean those questions come in, so it does make sense. Yes. Okay.